The mountain was silent, except for the sound of her ragged breathing. Blood soaked through her torn sleeve, her vision blurred, but her grip on the rifle never wavered. She thought she was finished, until the enemy crested the ridge. What happened next would turn her desperate fight into legend. The world had gone strangely quiet. Her ears still rang from the last explosion, but beyond that, there was nothing. No voices, no orders, no footsteps of allies nearby. Just the wind scraping across the rocks and the faint echo of distant gunfire. She reached for her shoulder and felt the sticky warmth of blood soaking through her torn jacket. The bullet had grazed deep, leaving her left arm heavy and almost useless. Alone, injured, and behind enemy lines. Every instinct told her to stay down, to conserve strength, to pray for backup that might never come. But the ridge loomed above her, casting its shadow like a threat. She knew what it meant. If the enemy reached that high ground, they would have the advantage, and no one, no squad, no reinforcements would stand a chance of holding them back. Her rifle lay just a few feet away, half buried in dust and dirt from the blast. She dragged herself toward it, biting back a cry of pain. The weapon wasn't just steel and wood to her. It was survival, memory, and promise. Every scratch on it carried a story. Every shot it had fired was proof that she was still here. She gripped it tightly, forcing her body to obey when her mind screamed to stop. The climb to the ridge looked endless, a jagged trail of rocks stained with ash. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale a stab of fire in her chest. But her training replayed in her head like a steady drumbeat. One step, one breath, one move forward. She tried to picture her squad. The laughter from the mess hall, the friendly insults during drills, the way they covered each other in firefights. Were they gone? Were they waiting for her? The questions clawed at her thoughts, but she shoved them aside. Dwelling on loss would only slow her down. She had one task now: stop the enemy from reaching the ridge. Her legs trembled as she pushed upward, the slope stealing more strength with every step. Stones slid beneath her boots, rattling down the hillside like tiny alarms that might give her away. She pressed her body close to the ground, listening, waiting, scanning the horizon for movement. Then, she saw them, figures in the distance, moving steadily toward the ridge. Their silhouettes blurred in the haze, but their intent was clear. They were advancing, confident, unchallenged. Her pulse quickened, fear clawing at her throat. She could retreat, hide, hope they passed by. Or she could hold. Her fingers tightened on the rifle, and for the first time since the injury, her fear began to burn into something sharper. Resolve. The ridge wasn't just a patch of high ground. It was the last barrier between survival and annihilation. And she would not let it fall. Not while she still had one breath left in her lungs. She pressed her cheek to the rifle stock, steadying herself. The silence was breaking. The fight was coming. The air grew heavier as the enemy closed in. She could hear them now. Boots crunching against gravel, gear clinking softly as they climbed. Their voices drifted up the slope, confident, careless. They didn't expect resistance. That would be their first mistake. She checked her rifle with trembling hands, running through the motions with muscle memory stronger than pain. Magazine loaded, chamber ready, scope aligned. Every click and snap grounded her, pulling her mind away from the sting in her shoulder and into the focus of a soldier preparing for battle. The ridge was her lifeline. If she could control its narrow crest, she could funnel their approach, force them into her sights one by one. She crawled into position, tucking herself between two boulders, her rifle's barrel resting steady. From this angle, she could see their helmets glinting in the dying sunlight. They were close, too close. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Her breathing slowed. For a split second, doubt gnawed at her. What if the first shot misses? What if the recoil costs her the chance to fire again? She shut it out. Fear had no place here. The first soldier stepped into her crosshairs. She exhaled, squeezed. The crack of the rifle split the silence. The figure dropped instantly, collapsing before his comrades even registered what had happened. Shouts rang out. Confusion. Chaos. They scattered, trying to locate the unseen shooter. She worked the bolt with practiced speed, loading the next round. Another target. Another shot. Another body falling to the dirt. She wasn't just fighting for herself now. She was holding the line, protecting the ghosts of her squad, the mission, the promise she'd made to never give up ground without a fight. Bullets tore past her position, sparking against the rocks. She ducked low, pressing against the earth, her heart hammering in her chest. Dust clouded the air, stinging her eyes, but she forced them open, scanning, searching, waiting for the next chance. The enemy adjusted quickly, moving in squads, advancing in short bursts. They were skilled, disciplined. This wouldn't be easy, but she had something they didn't: the ridge, the high ground, the element of conviction. She shifted to the side, crawling painfully to a new angle before they could pin her down. Every movement sent waves of agony through her wounded arm, but she clenched her jaw and kept going. Position, sight, breath, trigger. The rhythm became her lifeline. One fell, then another. The slope below her was becoming littered with still figures. But for every one she struck down, more appeared in the haze, shadows climbing, relentless. Her rifle grew hot in her hands, the metallic scent of gunpowder thick in the air. Her shoulder burned, her strength ebbing, but she refused to stop. This was no longer about survival, it was about defiance. The ridge trembled with the fury of battle, and though the odds stacked higher with every passing second, she remained. A lone figure against an army, but not broken. Not yet. The clash was far from over. The sun dipped lower, painting the ridge in deep red hues, as if the earth itself bled with her. The enemy's shouts grew louder, closer, angrier now. They had realized what stood in their way. Not a squad, not a fortress, but one lone soldier with a rifle who refused to break. Her body screamed for rest, her vision blurred at the edges, each blink heavier than the last. But the ridge anchored her. It was no longer just high ground. It was a promise, a stand, a final barrier she could not allow to fall. A burst of fire rattled the rocks inches from her face. Pebbles sprayed across her cheek, leaving small cuts. She rolled to her side, wincing as her injured arm flared with pain, and returned fire. The recoil jolted her, but the target fell. For every bullet they sent, she answered. For every shadow that rose, she struck it down with the precision of desperation. Her ammunition was running low. She could feel it with every magazine change. Lighter, emptier. She counted each shot in her head, refusing to waste even one. Each bullet had to matter. Each one had to buy her more time. Through the chaos, she remembered the voices of her squad. Their laughter, their trust, their belief in her. She wasn't fighting for medals or recognition, or even survival. She was fighting because they would have done the same for her. The ridge roared with violence, rifle fire, shouted commands, bodies crashing against stone. Some of the enemy tried to flank, scrambling up from the sides, but she shifted her position with grim determination. Her boots slipped on blood-slick rock, her breath rasping, but she never let go of the rifle. It had become an extension of her will, steady even when her body faltered. She pulled the trigger again. Another soldier collapsed. She shifted, fired again, and again. Each shot carved her defiance into the mountain. But then, the click of an empty chamber. Silence. Her stomach dropped. She fumbled for another magazine, her fingers shaking, slick with sweat and blood. Only one remained. She slid it in, racked the bolt, and forced herself back into position. 20 rounds. 20 breaths.
20 chances.
That was all. The enemy knew she was weakening. Their push grew bolder, their shouts more feral. Shapes surged toward her, climbing, scrambling, clawing for the ridge. She aimed carefully, every squeeze of the trigger echoing like thunder in her chest. Each body that fell was one step further from defeat, but one step closer to her final bullet. By the time the last round fired, the slope below was a graveyard of silence. The survivors hesitated, unwilling to face the phantom fury that had held them back. The ridge was hers still, though her body swayed, her strength gone. She lowered the rifle, her breathing ragged. Her vision dimmed, but a faint smile tugged at her lips. She had done it. Against all odds, against pain and fear, she had stood alone, and the ridge had not fallen. The battle was over. The legend had just begun.